Hello there, my name is Kelly Bain, and I will be discussing my takeaways and understanding of grounded theory. What is grounded theory? And so we know that it is still, again, a qualitative type research method. However, it does focus on generating theories from data. That was probably one of my biggest takeaways from this is that you work backwards in a way. It emphasizes data-driven theory development, abstract time, place, and people. And it also helps us to dive into complex phenomenon. And that idea of the complexity of it comes with little or no research or no existent research to guide us. So that was something that I thought that was a little bit different than what we've been talking about thus far. So the idea is that we're actually building or starting something from scratch and building a theory, right? Directly from the data that we collect versus having some pre-existing hypothesis. So, when do we use grounded theory? And so, again, I thought this was very unique with this particular type of qualitative research method. And one of the things that I thought that was interesting is that we often use this type of research study when there's minimal existing research. Of course, it allows us to be able to, as a researcher, to build theories from the ground up based on the data that we collect. Also, it's very or highly effective, of course, when there is no behaviors that we're observing. In other words, where traditional theories do not examine, right? Where we have to go a little bit above and beyond because it's a poorly understood area, right? So it allows for authentic development. And I thought this was great because my area of study is fits kind of into one of these categories. All right, grounded theory. What is this methodology? How do we go about it? And of course, our research begins with data collection, setting the foundation for the inquiry. Because we're gathering data, the idea is that we're taking that gathering data, we're going to code it, get an idea so that it allows us to help us to develop the theory. Of course, we have to have constant comparison and theoretical sampling, allowing us to adapt our theories in responses to new insights gained as data is collected. And it helps us to shape the emerging theoretical framework. So to me, what this meant was basically, once we get this data, we decide we go through and say, okay, we code it, analyze it. It helps us to develop a theory from the actual information. And then we can go back to theoretical sampling and comparing in order to adapt new data, right? That allows us to be able to get a theory. All right, and how does the coding work? Of course, it comes in 3 stages for this particular type of methodology. We have the open coding, where we actually break down the raw data, right? And then into parts, and then, of course, identify the initial categories. Then we have the axial coding, where we begin to see the connections between the categories, and then kind of start organizing it and getting a central theme. And then, of course, we move to the selective coding, where we would define the themes and have a more coherent theoretical framework. And of course, because we are working data backwards, in other words, collecting data, I think that this particular stage is really important to understand the coding process and be really, really disciplined in this because of the type of method search. What about disadvantages? Of course, would be time consuming, resource intensive, and it requires a high level of analytical skill. right? Because we have to continue to analyze the data. You may need somebody who has great high level of analytical skills, and you want this to be, it can be a little subjective sometimes, right? Because it's all based on interpretation, and it may vary between researchers. So this was one of the major disadvantages that I found in this particular type of research. All right, population groups that are applicable to this type of qualitative research. Number one, of course, individuals or groups are great, but particularly studies that involve complex social or organizational dynamics were great for this type of study. Now, what are some of the potential grounded study research questions or areas by which I can use this in my particular research? So again, if you've been watching or reviewing my videos, I talk about the idea of STEM and entrepreneurship, just in case it's your first time. So what I did this time is I thought about this type of research as it relates to questions that I want to answer, because there's a lot of there's a lack of information about chemistry labs, in particular with entrepreneurship versus STEM, and especially with incorporating chemistry lab, these particular techniques in the chemistry lab, and adjusting the actual experiments to answer or for me to get research for. So, couple questions. Number one, how do chemistry students translate academic lab experiences? So this was unique to me in particular because this particular study would, for instance, investigate how connections are formed, maintained, personal career growth, all those particular things, of course, that will help broaden the idea of entrepreneur ventures, right? And then the second one was, what factors influence the development of professional networks in chemistry, research environments, and their impact on career advancement? Since I am totally wanting to know about life after the chemistry lab as it relates to careers as well as entrepreneurship, this study, of course, would aim to understand maybe the processes by which students leverage their laboratory skills and knowledge to identify market opportunities, for instance. What does it look like? What are viable ideas? Also, it could explore triggers or barriers through the journey, right? From academic research to entrepreneurship. And then number three, how do faculty and institutional supports impact the innovation capabilities of chemistry labs in higher education? This was also really interesting because this particular question gave me an idea to say, okay, how would this particular research, for instance, this would explore the structures, the resources, and types of support provided by educational institutions that facilitate or hinder the innovative activities of chemistry labs. Because we know that, the access, what the particular institution provides, the chemistry lab in a university setting may be totally different than that in a K-12 setting. I'm particularly interested in the chemistry labs in undergraduate in higher education. But I thought this was would be a great study that I could do with using this grounded theory, because examine how the factors influence the lab's ability to contribute to both academic knowledge and practical applications, of course, affecting whether or not students actually gain an entrepreneurial mindset, right? Or do they don't even make those connections? So I thought that was also interesting. And then, of course, this is just application, looking at entrepreneur development, product development, how would investigate how chemistry students identify the market gaps and develop products, of course, academic and partnerships, and then innovations in green chemistry. So I went through and did a little bit more than what I needed to for kind of how I could use the research, because this was something that was totally up my alley, and it does provide me in particular something a little bit different than some of the other theories that we've already talked about. So I thought the grounded theory actually could offer a really robust framework for developing insights in complex issues, especially in mind, chemistry lab, integration of real world applications into the chemistry lab that promote student success, as well as entrepreneurial mindset, and career exploration. So I felt like it's a great and promising theory for educational and research settings, especially mine. Thank you so much for listening.